Ahogy végig tekintünk a keresztény egyház korai évszázadokon átívelő lelki történetén, egy nem elfogadott vallást láthatunk, ami nem volt népszerű. Sokan a korai századok keresztényei közül a legnagyobb árat fizették a hitükért, az életüket adták. A római Kolosseum a mai napig fennmaradt élő bizonyítéka ennek. A pogány római uralom alatt a keresztény egyház folyamatos hitküzdelmet folytatott. Viszont azt biztosan elmondhatjuk, hogy a kíméletlen üldöztetés távol tartotta az egyháztól a névleges és langymeleg keresztényeket. Aki keresztény volt, csak szívvel, lélekkel tehette, nem volt középút. De a 4. század olyan fordulatot hozott, ami gyökeresen megváltoztatott mindent. Konstantin császár megtérése megváltoztatta az egész keresztény történelem menetét. Ennek gyökere ide, Angliába, York városába nyúlik vissza. Krisztus után 306-ban Konstantint itt kiáltották ki császárnak. Az édesapja Konstantinus 305 és 306 között Britanniában tartózkodott, és Konstantin vele volt egészen a haláláig. Majd ő követte apját a trónon. De nem ment olyan simán a dolog. A császárságra igényt tartott Licinius és Maxentius is. És Maxentiusszal vívott csataerő történt, hogy Konstantin úgy érezte, hogy itt most valami többre is szüksége lesz, mint katonái segítségére. És ezért Istent hívta segítségül. Úgy hitte, egy keresztet lát az égen, és egy hang így szól hozzá, ezzel a jellel győzedelmeskedhetsz. Számára ez jelzés volt, hogy vegye fel a keresztény hitet, és ezzel egy hatalmas változás vette kezdetét. A pogány Róma pápai Róma lett. A pogánságot már egy elismert kereszténység váltotta fel. Sok történész megkérdőjelezi Konstantin megtérésének hitelességét. Vajon egy mélyen gyökerező bibliai hiten alapult, vagy csupán politikai trükk volt, hogy egy megosztott birodalmat összetartson? Egy dolog azonban bizonyos. Megtérését követően olyan gyakorlatok férkőztek be az egyházba, amelyeknek korábban nem volt ott helye. A pogány szentélyeket keresztény templomokká alakították át. Rómában a Pantheon keresztény templom lett, a pogány istenekből pedig keresztény szentek lettek. Például Jupiter szobrából Szent Péter szobra, és még sorolhatnánk. Míg némelyek örültek ezeknek a változásoknak, és örömmel vették az üldöztetés végét, az újonnan kialakult státuszukat, addig Európa szerte sok keresztény volt, aki szembeszállt ezekkel a változásokkal. Számukra az üldöztetés folytatódott, mivel elhatárolódtak az anyaszentegyháztól. Ők voltak azok a keresztények, akik megőrizték a tiszta apostoli hitet, amit nemzedékről nemzedékre adtak át. Európában mindenhol elszóródott csoportok voltak, Észak-Olaszországban, Dél-Franciaországban, a kelta egyház pedig itt Britanniában és még sok más helyen. A Biblia úgy utal rájuk Jelenések könyve 12. fejezetében, mint a pusztai egyházra. Nem voltak mindig a legnagyobbak, sem a legnépesebbek, de Istennek mindig volt egy népe, aki igaz maradt hozzá és hűséges az ő szavához. És ettől a ponttól kezdődően kétféle egyház jelent meg, az elismert, legfőbb, de megalkudott egyház, és az üldözött, gyakran kisebb, de tiszta egyház. A kérdés számunkra ma az, vajon a kettő közül melyikbe tartozunk? Soha ne kössünk kompromisszumot a népszerűség kedvéért, az igazság kárára, függetlenül attól, hogy milyen helyzetben vagyunk.
As millions of pagans hastily joined the church, they were naturally reluctant to dispose of their idol treasures. The Romans and the Greeks were so used to being surrounded by symbols of their deities. They began doing the same thing with Christianity. So many of these new converts just relabeled their idols with Christian names, like Paul, Mary, and Peter.
A statue of Jupiter became a statue of Peter.
And we know that because it has a sun disk right over its head that indicates that this is not Peter, but it's a pagan statue that's been renamed.
Instead of Romulus and Remus, hey, why not the martyrs, the great martyrs Cosmas and Damian, right?
The representations of Isis, which is originally an Egyptian goddess but has become very Greek already, becomes essentially the representation of Mary carrying her child.
You have a mother and child tradition all the way down through history. You have it in Mithraism, you have it in Babylon, You have it all the way back in Persia.
It appears that Mary acquired some of the characteristics that were associated with some of these other goddesses.
She wears a dark blue coat and she stands on the half moon. She is the mother of all gods. Isis carrying her son Horus. That is the image that gets a new name, and now the name is Mary carrying the child Jesus.
Or a depiction of the god Hermes is shown as Christ the Good Shepherd.
Asclepius is the iconographic model for a lot of the depictions of Jesus, yes. A young, vibrant god with curly hair down to about here, and a little beard.
Soon the statues of the saints and even Jesus began adorning the churches. Even though God clearly forbids this practice in the Ten Commandments, people continue to revere and to pray to these relabeled idols.
Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them.
Related to the last point is the veneration of Mary, the mother of Jesus. While it is true, Mary was a faithful woman and greatly honored to be his mother, the scriptures teach nowhere that she's to be deified or worshipped.
Mary had always been important in ancient Christian history, but over the Middle Ages she becomes elevated almost to looking at it detachedly, almost to the rank of a semi-deity.
The Virgin Mary was believed to be the one who would speak up for guilty human beings to her supremely virtuous and judgmental and rather censorious son. It's a very strange image, but that's how the religious art of the period shows it.
The Bible does not venerate Mary as a special saint. It lifts her up as a pure, wonderful woman used by God to give birth to the Messiah.
Yet, at the Council of Nicaea in 325, the Church elevated Mary to the stature of a goddess and co-mediator with Christ. Even as early as the late 4th century, churches were being dedicated to the Virgin Mary. But sadly, these were not the only errors that slipped in during this time.
Now, if you move forward in time, or during the same time period, you're going to find another symbol that is even more important. As a matter of fact, you're going to see two symbols in this picture. This is a pagan statue of Jupiter that has been renamed St. Peter. And he's holding up, guess what? The trident symbol. That symbol is a satanic symbol recognizing the power of the gods of the sun. And you'll also see another symbol in this picture, and that is the halo. Look real carefully. It's not a halo, it's a sunburst. What they put behind the heads of the gods, or the saints, if you will, is not a halo, it is a sunburst representing the power of the sun god. And they call this St. Peter in the Vatican, but in reality, history tells us this is the god Jupiter. You also see what is baby Jesus, supposed to be baby Jesus, is none other than baby Tammuz. And how do we know it's not Jesus? Because you see trident all over the place. You see the trident symbol in the hand of the infant Jesus, along with the tridents coming out of the statue's head. You'll see 3 tridents, 2 coming off the sides of the head and 1 coming off the top of the head. This is not baby Jesus, ladies and gentlemen. This is a pagan sun god, Tammuz, from the story of Baal, Nimrod, and Semiramis, ended up being Cupid in today's Valentine's Day.
Now, did you notice how the 4 prophetic beasts of Daniel chapter 7, which we've come to find out are really kingdoms or political powers, as well as that first prophetic beast of Revelation chapter 13, which is as well a kingdom and a political power, all of them are seen coming up out of the water, coming up out of the sea. It's evident that this water must be symbolic of something. And the Bible gives us a clear understanding of what water is a symbol of in Bible prophecy in the book of Revelation, chapter 17 and verse 15. We are told there, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sittest, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. Therefore, waters in the Bible can be symbolic of a very highly populated area occupied by many nations, kindreds, tongues, and people, letting us know that this beast or political power, this kingdom in Revelation chapter 13, came into prominence in a highly populated place on planet Earth, and it ended up ruling over many nations, kindreds, tongues, and peoples. And what's so interesting about that prophetic beast, which is a kingdom or a political power in Revelation chapter 13, is that the Word of God tells us under that symbol of a beast that it had upon its heads the name of blasphemy. The reason why that's so significant is because a kingdom or a political power is a secular entity. But the word blasphemy has very specific religious connotations associated with it. So what we're looking at in Revelation chapter 13 is a political power that unites church and state. We would call that a religio-political authority. Now, the Bible actually gives us a definition of what blasphemy is in the book of John chapter 10 and verse 33. When Jesus was being contested by the Pharisees and they began to pick up stones to stone him, Jesus asked him, "For what good work are you going to stone me?" They said to him, "For a good work we stone thee not, but for blasphemy. And because thou being a man makest thyself God." So to blaspheme is for a man to make himself God. In Mark chapter 2 and verse 7, the Bible gives us another definition of blasphemy. We are told there, "Who is this man that thus speaketh blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God only?" So according to the Bible, if a man professes that he has the ability or the authority to forgive another man's sins, he's committing the act of blasphemy. Now, in just a few minutes, you've actually learned a great deal about this first beast of Revelation chapter 13, because you found out that a beast in Bible prophecy is a symbol of a political power or a kingdom. You found that out in Daniel chapter 7. And in particular, this beast of Revelation chapter 13, beginning at verse 1, it must be a religio-political governing power because it blasphemes. And the word blasphemy has very specific religious connotations associated with it. And the very fact that it blasphemes means that this religio-political system, this religio-political power that unites church and state, it must exalt a man to the position of God and profess that it has the power or the authority to forgive sins. Now tell me, do you know of any system that's in existence in our world that fits that identity? Man, Pope Francis, receives the adoration of God. And as you can see, the whole world is wandering after the beast. This man is being looked upon as God on earth. This is clearly blasphemy. there's no doubt about it that the papacy fulfills the prophetic role of the beast of Revelation chapter 13 and verse 1. This is horrible. You may be wondering why I'm here, what you're looking at. Right now I'm inside of a confessional. This is a booth within inside of the Roman Catholic Church in which its adherents are told that they must come and confess their sins to the local presiding priest, at which point the priest will not only hear the sins of the petitioner, but then prescribe to them to say a certain number of Hail Marys and probably do some other type of penance so that God will forgive their sins, or rather that they will forgive them of their sins. This is a perfect example of blasphemy, because the Bible tells us that no man can forgive sin but God. But the Roman Catholic Church has set up a system in which people have to seek a man so that they might feel as though they've been absolved of their guilt, which they have incurred by transgressing the law of God. Now in Revelation chapter 13 and verse 2, the Bible gives us even more critical information in not only identifying this beast, but understanding its character and the way that it operates. We're told in Revelation 13 and verse 2, "And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. His feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth was as the mouth of a lion." So this one singular beast is actually an amalgamation of several different beasts: a leopard, a bear, and a lion. Now, what's so significant about this is that those three beasts that make up this one singular composite beast in Revelation chapter 13, they're actually spoken of in the book of Daniel chapter 7. You see, in Daniel chapter 7, there's a lion that has two wings of an eagle. It's a prophetic symbol of the kingdom of Babylon. Then there's a bear that's risen up on one side, and it has three ribs in its mouth. It's a prophetic symbol of the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians. And then there's a leopard that has four heads and four wings of a fowl. It's a prophetic symbol of the kingdom of Greece.
The lion, which has two wings of an eagle, it's a symbol of the kingdom of Babylon. The bear, which has three ribs in its mouth and risen up on one side, it's Medo-Persia. And the four-headed leopard with four wings of a fowl, it symbolizes the kingdom of Greece. And the four-headed leopard, which has four wings of a fowl, it symbolizes the kingdom of Greece.
All of them collectively come together to make this one singular amalgamation of a beast in Revelation chapter 13. And note carefully that when John the Revelator saw this vision of this beast in Revelation chapter 13, he said, "The beast which I saw was like unto a leopard." Yes, it has the feet of a bear, and it as well had the mouth of a lion, but primarily its appearance looked like a leopard. This is letting us know that the papacy, the Roman Catholic Church, in a marked fashion, would personify the characteristics of Greece. So you may be wondering, how exactly are we going to figure out what principles or practices or even ideologies that the Greeks were notorious for have today been adopted by the papacy and are practiced very prevalently within the ranks of Catholicism? It's an easy question to answer. All we have to do is go to the very same source from which we've drawn the rest of our answers, the Bible, the living Word of God. You see, in the book of Acts, chapter 17 and verse 20, when Paul was in Athens, which, by the way, at that time was a part of the territory of Greece, he said that all the Athenians and strangers that were there spent their time in nothing else but either to tell or to hear something new. So in other words, the Greeks were a people that loved to engage in human philosophy. They loved to exalt human reasoning. And then in Acts chapter 17 and verse 21, when Paul stood up to address this multitude of Athenians, he said, "Ye men of Athens, I perceive that in all things ye are too superstitious." Superstition was something that was ingrained within the culture of the Greeks. They were a people that were caught up in paganism. So the only question that remains is this: is the Roman Catholic Church a system of worship that exalts the philosophy, the human reasoning of men above the living Word of God, the Holy Bible? And have they adopted original pagan practices within their religious belief system and have retitled it Christianity for the masses? If you're not sure, you're getting ready to find out. Right now, we're in the Basilica of San Clemente. And if you're not sure that Roman Catholicism is nothing more than paganism revived and dressed up in Christian garments, then you need to visit this place, because what you're going to find out here at the Basilica of San Clemente is that this so-called Christian edifice was built on top of a structure where the pagans would come and worship their patron god Mithra, the sun god. And not only that, but the Christians ended up fusing in their worship system paganism, and what you have is nothing more than an amalgamation between Christianity and paganism. So the Bible is clear and very precise in identifying Roman Catholicism as a cult mystery worship revived in a system of worship that professes to exalt Jesus Christ. It is astounding what you'll find right here in the Basilica of San Clemente.
On this stone artifact located within the ruins of the Temple of Mithra, you'll notice this carving of a decorated evergreen tree. It's known as the Sarve or the rocket juniper. It was erected to pay homage to the birth of Mithra during the time of the winter solstice in the month of December. Children would decorate this tree with their wishes that they would wrap up in colorful pieces of silk cloth and then hang them on this tree as offerings to the sun god Mithra. In 353 AD, Pope Julius I authorized that during the winter solstice, a time which was previously reserved by the pagans for the celebration of the birth of the sun god Mithra, should now on December 25th be a time to celebrate the birth of Christ, hence the emergence of the Mass of Christ or Christ Mass. Though partially marred, you can clearly see on this wall of the temple ruins of the sun god Mithra 2 solar wheels. These solar wheels have 8 spokes. They're symbolic of the 8 solstices, one of which being the solstice of winter, which was known as Yule. This is where we get the phrase Yuletide greetings from, which people use during the Christmas season. Interesting enough, in the Basilica of San Clemente, located just above these pagan ruins, you can find the very same solar wheel that was used in the worship of the sun god Mithra. But what's even more astounding is the puzzling fact that the largest solar wheel that is known to be in existence is found right in the midst of St. Peter's Square, which is the seat of the papacy, the sovereign governing authority over the Roman Catholic Church.
As I've written before and publicly stated in interviews, the vast majority of people, when looking at Washington, D.C. and at the Vatican, they never comprehend how those cities constitute one of the greatest open conspiracies of all time. There, reproduced in all of their glory and right before the world's eyes, is an ancient talisman diagram. It's based on the history and cult of Isis, Osiris, and Horus, including the magical utilities meant to generate the deity's return. The primeval concept, especially that of sacred domes facing obelisks, this is something that was designed in antiquity for the express purpose of regeneration, resurrection, and apotheosis, for deity incarnation from the underworld to the earth's surface through union of respective figures. The dome, the ancient structural representation of the womb of Isis, and the obelisk, the ancient representation of the erect male phallus of Osiris. That layout, as modeled in antiquity, exists today on the grandest scale at the heart of the capital of the most important government, most powerful government on earth, the United States, as well as in the heart of the most politically influential church on earth, the Vatican. Now, given this fact and the pattern provided by the Apostle Paul and the Apocalypse of John, the book of Revelation, that the end times would culminate in a marriage between political, that is Antichrist, and religious, that is false prophet, authorities at the return of Osiris Apollo, it really does behoove open-minded researchers to carefully consider these prophecies in stone, as it defines the spiritual energy that's knowingly or unknowingly being invoked at both locations with potential ramifications for the year 2025 and beyond. The U.S. Capitol has been called the Mirror Vatican due to the strikingly similar layout and design of its primary buildings and streets. Now, that's no accident. In fact, America's forefathers first named the capital city Rome. But the parallelism between Washington and the Vatican is most clearly illustrated by the Capitol building and dome facing the obelisk known as the Washington Monument, and at St. Peter's Square Basilica in the Vatican by a similar dome facing a familiar obelisk, both of which were, according to their own official records, fashioned after the Roman Pantheon, the circular domed rotunda dedicated to all pagan gods. Now, this layout, a domed temple facing an obelisk, is an ancient alchemical blueprint that holds significant esoteric meaning. For those who may not know, the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C. is historically based on a pagan Masonic temple theme. Thomas Jefferson, who shepherded the anti-Christian Roman Pantheon design, wrote to the Capitol's architect Benjamin Latrobe, defining it as, quote, the first temple dedicated to embellishing with Athenian taste the course of a nation looking far beyond the range of Athenian destinies, end quote. The Athenian Empire was, of course, first known as Ossyria, the kingdom of Osiris. In 1833, Massachusetts Representative Rufus Coyote agreed, writing, quote, we have built no national temples but the Capitol, end quote. Now, to understand what these statements may soon mean for the future of the world, one needs to comprehend how these apparati, the dome and the obelisk facing it, facilitate important archaic and modern protocols for invigorating prophetic supernatural alchemy. In ancient times, the obelisk represented the god Osiris's missing male organ, which Isis was not able to find after her husband brother was slain and chopped into 14 pieces by his evil brother Set. The story involves a detailed account of the envious brother and 72, that's an important number, conspirators tricking Osiris into climbing inside of a box, which Set quickly locked and threw into the Nile. Osiris drowned, and his body floated down the Nile River where it snagged on the limbs of a tamarisk tree. In Byblos, Isis recovered his body from the riverbank and took it into her care, but in her absence, Seth stole the body again, and this time chopped it into 14 pieces, which he threw back into the Nile. Isis searched the riverbank until she recovered every piece except for the genitals, which had been swallowed by a fish. Isis recombined the 13 pieces of Osiris' corpse and replaced the missing organ with a magic facsimile, an obelisk, which she used to impregnate herself during the very first raising of Osiris ceremony, in which she called forth the seed of the dead god from the underworld up through the magic device, thus giving rise to Osiris again in the person of his son, Horus. Now, this legendary ritual for reincarnating Osiris formed the core of Egyptian cosmology, as well as the Rosicrucian Masonic dying and rising myths, and was fantastically venerated on the most imposing scale throughout all of Egypt by towering obelisks representing the phallus of Osiris and domes representing the pregnant belly of Isis, including at Karnak, where the upright obelisks were vitalized or stimulated from the energy of the masturbatory sun god Ra shining down upon them. In Egypt, where rituals were performed to actually raise the spirit of Osiris into the reigning pharaoh, political authority in the form of divine kingship or theocratic statesmanship was established, later reflected in the political and religious doctrine of royal and political legitimacy, or the divine right of kings, who supposedly derived their right to rule from the will of God, with the exception, in some countries, that the king is subject to the church and to the pope. But this meant, among other things, that the Egyptian pharaoh enjoyed extraordinary authority as the son of the sun god Ra and the incarnation of the falcon god Horus during his lifetime. At death, Pharaoh would become the Osiris, the divine judge of the netherworld, and on earth his son and predecessor would take his place as the newly anointed manifestation of Horus. So each generation of pharaohs provided the gods with a spokesman for the present world and for the afterlife, while also offering the nation divinely appointed leadership. And yet, the observant listener may wonder, was there something more to the pharaoh's deification than faith in ritual magic? Well, the cult center of Amun-Ra at Thebes may actually hold the answer, as it was the site of the largest religious structure ever built, the Temple of Amun-Ra at Karnak, and the location of many extraordinary, mysterious rites. The great temple, with its miles of walls and gardens, the primary object, by the way, of fascination and worship by the nemesis of Moses, the pharaoh of the Exodus, Ramses II, was the place where each pharaoh reconciled his divinity in the company of Amun-Ra during the festival of Opet. Now, the festival was held at the Temple of Luxor, and it included a procession of gods carried on barges up the Nile River from Karnak to the temple. The royal family would accompany the gods on boats, while the Egyptian laity would walk along the shore, calling out and making requests of the gods. But once at Luxor, the pharaoh and his entourage would enter the Holy of Holies, the Temple of Isis, the domed belly, where the ceremony to raise the spirit of Osiris into the king would be performed, the raising of Osiris ceremony, by the magicians of Egypt. And don't forget, these men were very powerful, as they were able to mimic almost all of the miracles conducted by God through the hand of Moses during the Exodus. But in any case, it was truly believed that Pharaoh at that moment would be transmogrified into a living deity, Osiris in flesh, Outside, large groups of dancers and musicians would wait anxiously, and then when the king emerged as the born-again Osiris, the crowd would erupt in gaiety. And from that day forward, the pharaoh would be considered to be, just as the God ciphered on the Great Seal of the United States will be, the son and spiritual incarnation of the supreme deity. The all-seeing eye of Horus, Apollo, Osiris, above the unfinished pyramid on the Great Seal, represents that event. Now fast forward to today, and at the inauguration of every American president, across town at the House of the Temple, the modern Egyptian magicians, the Freemasons, Scottish Rite, 33rd degree, are conducting the raising of Osiris ceremony to call the seat of Osiris Apollo from the underworld through the Washington Monument obelisk, where it magically emits into the U.S. Capitol dome, while America's new leader is standing there accepting his role as the living representative of Osiris. This is done in anticipation of the day when events are going to surpass parity, and the beast that was and is not shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition, the Greek word Apollo. And they that dwell on earth shall wonder whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not, and yet is. Revelation 17:8. For a few adepts of history and secret orders, this DC ritual is deliciously staged, as even the term inaugurate is from the Latin inauguratio, and it refers to the archaic ceremony by which the Roman augurs or soothsayers would approve a king or a ruler through omens as being sanctioned by the god Jupiter, the same entities whose prophecies on the Great Seal herald his upcoming challenge to Yahweh Jehovah for heavenly supremacy, while his son Apollo Osiris seizes authority over the world in a final pagan golden age. As pointed out in my new book, Zeitgeist 2025, the dome where U.S. presidents stand during their inauguration, and where they lie in state for their spirit to rise into the apotheosis overhead to join George Washington in the kingdom of Osiris at death, alone is an unparalleled magical construct that openly hides the most formidable ancient supernaturalism meant for regeneration of Apollo Osiris. In fact, I would go so far as to say it is a satanic antichrist plagiarism of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ that I believe is going to play a role in the healing of Antichrist after he experiences a deadly head wound in Revelation 13:3. Note that the 1865 apotheosis of Washington, painted by Greek-Italian artist Constantino Brumidi, is visible through the oculus of the dome in the rotunda, and it bears anything but Christian symbols. It's filled with Greco-Roman gods to whom Thomas Jefferson dedicated the United States. The very term apotheosis means to become a god, or revived eternal being. Now, in this depiction, Washington is becoming Osiris of the afterlife. The gods in the painting surrounding Washington are depicting helping the founders establish a more perfect union, as in the New Atlantis scheme that I go into the details of in Zeitgeist 2025. Directly beneath the apotheosis are 72 pentagrams, forming a sorcerous gateway used by secret society members and occultists to bind and loose the 72 fallen angels that reside over the heathen nations. You can learn more about that in Psalms 82, Deuteronomy 32, and so on. Finally, under the floor of the rotunda is the U.S. National Crypt, where an empty tomb resides. He is not here, for he is risen. This is where I argue that Antichrist will be taken after his head injury, and the Freemasons will conduct the raising of Osiris ceremony, at which time he will be transmogrified into the living incarnation of Osiris Apollo. Now, there is more to the Capitol Dome, Antichrist plagiarism of the life of Christ, that I go into in Zeitgeist 2025 than these aspects of the building's design might infer. But these points of interest clearly reveal how the architects imagined a dark parody of Jesus. How so? Well, as Jesus died and rose into heaven, so Washington rises to become the Osiris in the top of the U.S. Capitol Dome. As the 72 pentagrams in the Capitol Dome are used to control the 72 cosmo craters over the nation, Jesus too confronted the 72 fallen watchers. From the base of Mount Hermon to his visit in the underworld and final ascension into heaven, whereby he proclaimed in Revelation 1:18, "I am he that liveth and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore," which is a clear denunciation of the Osiris dying and rising God myth that was so popular during his first advent. He goes on, "Amen, and have the keys of hell." This is the word Hades, the names that the Greeks gave to Osiris, "and of death," end quote. It's important because Osiris was the lord of the underworld in Greek myth who controlled who possessed the keys to the 12 gates of Egyptian afterlife. Much has been written by historians within and without Masonry as to the relevance of the number 72 and the alchemy related to it. For instance, in Kabbalah, Freemasonry, and Jewish apocalyptic writings, the number 72 equals the total of wings that Enoch received when he's transformed into the powerful angel Metatron. You could see 3 Enoch 9:2 for more on that. And this plays an important role for the Brotherhood, as Metatron was also known as the angel in the whirlwind, who was enabled as the guiding spirit over America during George W. Bush's administration for the purpose of directing the future and fate of the United States, as was also prayed by Congressman Major R. Owens of New York before the House of Representatives on Wednesday, February 28, 2001. But in the context of the Capitol Dome and the 72 stars that circle Washington's apotheosis in the womb of Isis, the significance of this symbolism is far more important. In sacred literature, including the Bible, stars are symbolic of angels, and within Masonic Gnosticism, these 72 powerful entities, reflected in the 72 conspirators that controlled Osiris's life in Egyptian myth, currently administer the affairs of earth under Satan, the god of this world, according to 2 Corinthians 4:4. Experts in the study of the divine council believe that, beginning at the Tower of Babel, the world and its inhabitants were disinherited by the sovereign God of Israel and placed under the authority of 72 angels. These angels became corrupt and disloyal to God in their administration of those nations, according to Psalms 82. These beings quickly became worshipped on earth as gods following Babel, led by Nimrod, Gilgamesh, Osiris, Apollo. Consistent within this tradition, the designers of the Capitol Dome, the Great Seal of the United States, and the obelisk Washington Monument circled the apotheosis of Washington with 72 pentagram stars. They dedicated the obelisk 72 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and they placed 72 stones on the Great Seal's uncapped pyramid, above which the prophetic eye of Horus, Osiris, Apollo stares. These 3 sets of 72, combined with the imagery and occult numerology of the Osiris obelisk, the Isis dome, and the oracular Great Seal, are richly symbolic of the influence of Satan and his angels over the world, according to Luke 4, 2 Corinthians 4, Ephesians 6, and other scripture, with a prophecy towards Satan's final earthly empire, the coming Novus Ordo Seclorum, or new pagan golden age. Now, in order for the inevitable worship of Osiris to be reestablished on earth, the 72 demons that govern the nations have to be controlled. Therefore, they are set in magical constraints on the Great Seal, the Washington obelisk, and the pentagram circles around the apotheosis of Washington in order to bind and force the desired effect. In The Secret Destiny of America, famous Freemason Manly P. Hall noted as well that the 72 stones on the pyramid on the Great Seal correspond to the 72 arrangements of the Tetragrammaton, or the four-lettered name of God in Hebrew. He wrote this: "These four letters can be combined in 72 combinations, resulting in what is called the Shemhamphorish, which represents in turn the laws, powers, and energies of nature," end quote. Now folks, the idea that the mystical name of God could be invoked to bind or release those supernatural agents, or powers and energies of nature as Hall called them, is meaningful creed within many occult tenets, including Kabbalah and Freemasonry. This is why the 72 stars are pentagram-shaped around the deified Freemason George Washington. Medieval books of magic, or grimoires such as the Key of Solomon and the Lesser Key of Solomon, not only identify the star systems Orion, or Osiris, and Pleiades, Apollo, as the home of these powers, but applies great importance to the pentagram shape of the stars for binding and releasing their influence. Adept Rosicrucians and Freemasons have long used these magical texts, the Key of Solomon and the Lesser Key of Solomon, to do just that. Modern people, especially in America, may view all of these symbols used in this magic, especially the dome representing the habitually pregnant belly of Isis, and the obelisk representing the erect phallus of Osiris, as profane or pornographic. But they were in fact ritualized fertility objects, which the ancients believed could produce tangible reactions, properties, or manifestations within the material world. The obelisk and dome, as imitations of the deity's male and female reproductive organs, could, through government representation, invoke into existence the being or beings symbolized by them. And that is why inside the temple or dome, prostitutes representing the human manifestation of the goddess were also available for ritual sex as a form of imitative magic. Through such imitative sex, the dome and obelisk became energy receivers, capable of assimilating raw essence from the rays of the sun, which in turn would draw forth the seed of the underworld Osiris. The seed of the dead entity would, according to the supernaturalism, transmit upward from out of the underworld through the base or testes of the obelisk and magically emit from the tower's head into the womb or dome of Isis, where incarnation into the sitting pharaoh, king, or president would occur during what Freemasons also call the raising of Osiris ceremony. In this way, Osiris could be habitually born again or reincarnated as Horus and constantly direct the spiritual destiny of the nation. Something most people do not know and will be shocked to learn in my new book is that the Freemasons even constructed a symbolic seed of Osiris at the Washington Monument obelisk. If an anatomically correct phallus is placed over the Washington Monument, right in the testicular section beneath a manhole cover, where it should be, is a miniature 12-foot-tall obelisk hidden just beneath the surface of the ground, representing the seat of Osiris. The number 12, of course, is the biblical and occult numerology for perfect government. In this case, that new world order over which Osiris Apollo is going to reign, when the beast that thou sawest was and is not and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition, rises at the end of time to oversee the dawn of a new golden age. This metaphysical phenomenon of deity resurrection involving mystical seed reminds of the messianic proto-evangelium promise, "And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel," Genesis 3:15, which for occultists was countered by Nimrod Semiramis and was central to numerous other ancient cultures, especially developed in Egypt, where Nimrod Semiramis were known as Osiris and Isis. And in Ezekiel chapter 8, the children of Israel set up the obelisk or image of jealousy. You can see that in verse 5, facing the entry of their temple, just as the dome faces the obelisk in Washington, D.C., and in the Vatican City, and were condemned by God for worshiping the sun, or Ra, while weeping for Osiris or Tammuz. The familiar Masonic figure of the point within a circle is the symbol of this union between Ra, Osiris, and Isis. The point represents Osiris's phallus in the center of the circle or womb of Isis, which in turn is enlivened by the sun rays of Ra, just as today at the Vatican, where the Egyptian obelisk of Osiris sits within a circle, and in Washington, D.C., where the obelisk does similarly, situated so as to be the first thing that the sun, or Ra, strikes as it rises over the capital city, and which, when viewed from overhead, forms this magical point within a circle known as a circumpunct. The sorcery is further amplified, according to ancient occultic beliefs, by the presence of the reflecting pool in Washington, D.C., which serves as a mirror to heaven and a transferring point for those spirits and energies. And just what is it that the spirits see when they look downward on the reflecting pool in Washington? They find a city dedicated to and built in honor of the legendary deities Isis and Osiris, complete with the 13 gathered pieces of Osiris, America's original 13 colonies, the required obelisk known as the Washington Monument, the Capitol Dome of Isis for impregnation and incarnation of deity into each pharaoh or president, and last but not least, the official government buildings erected to face their respective counterparts and whose cornerstones, including the U.S. Capitol Dome, were dedicated during astrological alignment related to the zodiacal constellation Virgo or Isis, as required for the magic to occur. The information that I just shared with you is only the tip of the iceberg of what I reveal in my new book, Zeitgeist 2025. In fact, much of what I uncover in this book is too hot for mainstream platforms like YouTube and Facebook and would immediately be censored. But now, for the first time ever, you are going to discover hidden secrets and forgotten prophecies surrounding the year 2025, how the current U.S. government is tied to America's occult destiny, lost prophecies from Qumran forecasting 2025 as the final age of man, why historians and intelligence agencies foresee a totalitarian world government by 2025, how America's capital city is laid out to actuate the arrival of the Antichrist, about the malevolent Orwellian Trinity currently converging, the means by which the population's thinking and speaking are being homogenized to create a nation of assimilated devotees who are going to embrace the Antichrist, the deep esoteric meanings that names and titles held in ancient societies, the impact they had upon destiny, and what that precedent could mean now for America's near future. Who the mysterious character Melchizedek of Genesis 14 truly was, what the people of the name covenant is, and much more. So go to sidroth.org/horn or click the link below to get your digital copy of my revelatory new book, Zeitgeist 2025, so you can count yourself among the ones prepared for what is coming next.
Szeretettel üdvözöljük Önöket a Klagemauer TV-ben. Ma azzal a kérdéssel foglalkozunk, hogy mennyire humánus valójában a szabadkőműves csúcs. Albert Pike, az egyik legmagasabb rangú szabadkőműves páholyvezető, az illuminátusok egyik vezérének, Giuseppe Mazzininek 1871. augusztus 15-én az alábbi tervet küldte el a világuralom elérésének céljából. Sok forrás bizonyítja ennek az írásnak a meglétét. Az írás többek között tartalmazta az első világháború tervét azzal a céllal, hogy az ortodox egyházat védő orosz cár hatalmát megdöntsék, és egy kommunista, ateista államot alapítsanak meg. Pontosan így történt. Az első világháború után 1917-ben következett a bolsevik forradalom, és a kommunizmus és az ateizmus hatalomra kerültek. A továbbiakban így folytatja. Ezután következzen egy második világháború Anglia és Németország között. Ezt azért kell tervezni, hogy mint ellentétet szembeállítsuk a kommunizmust a zsidó-keresztény kultúrával. Erre az ellentétre azért van szükség, hogy Izraelben cionista államot alapíthassunk. Pontosan ez történt a második világháború után. Folytatom az idézetet. Azután jöjjön egy harmadik világháború. A középkeleten törjön ki a zsidóság és az iszlám között, és terjedjen ki az egész földre. Ez az iszlám és a zsidóság közötti háború hozza el végleg Armageddont, a végső, mindent eldöntő csatát. Albert Pike egy további levelében elmagyarázza, hogy ez hogy kerüljön megvalósításra. Idézem. Először is megalapítjuk a nihilizmust. Minden norma, érték, cél, társadalmi rend feltétel nélküli tagadását, vagyis ezt a kommunista ateista rendszert. Utána okozunk egy kataklizmát, egy földtörténeti katasztrófát, egy olyan háborút és olyan szenvedést, amilyet a világ még sosem látott. Végeredményben azt akarjuk megmutatni az embereknek, hogy az abszolút ateizmus hova vezet a végén. Egy hatalmas vérfürdőnek kell lennie. Végül az ateizmust a kereszténységgel egyidejűleg kell legyőzni, és Lucifer tisztatlanainak érvénybe léptetését a kereszténység és az ateizmus megsemmisítésével egyidejűleg kell bevezetni. Ezt tehát Albert Pike már 1871-ben mind megírta. Ne higgyenek nekünk, vizsgáljanak meg mindent a megadott források alapján. A viszontlátásra.
A Dávid csillaga. Honnan jön ez a szimbólum? Sosem ír róla határozottan magában a Bibliában. Van róla szó a Talmudban? Van egy rész erről a Bibliában? Vagy nincs? Tehát akkor nem igazán tudja, hogy pontosan honnan származik? Nem. Elkapott. Tehát senki sem tudja. Nem tudom, mert tudjuk, hogy Dávid csillagának hívják. Van bármi köze is Dávidhoz? Nem hinném. Kellett legyen valahol. Nem emlékszem pontosan, az összefüggés mi lehetett. Én úgy gondolom, hogy amit ők Dávid csillagának mondanak, az valójában Renfán csillaga. Mivel amikor tanulmányozod a Bibliát, meglátod, hogy amikor más isteneket imádtak, a Biblia beszél arról, hogy vitték magukkal a zászlóját a csillagnak, az istenüknek, Renfánnak.
Visszautasítottátok a Biblia istenét. Felvettétek magatokra a ti istenetek, Renfán vagy Kijun csillagát, ez a hatágú csillag. Ezek különböző nevei Moloknak, hatalmas Bálnak, a nagy tűzistennek, aki maga az ördög.
Belzebub.
Úgy van, Belzebub. És sokkolva voltak ezáltal. Most akkor ki is ez a csillagisten? Ha olvasták volna az Ószövetségüket, tudnák ezt. Ámos könyvében ugyanis Isten mondta, hogy felvettétek a csillagot és haragra gerjesztettetek ezzel, és fel is áldoztátok a saját gyermekeiteket a csillagistennek a tüzeken keresztül. Feláldozták a saját gyermekeiket a zsidók a csillagistennek.
Amikor egy hamis istent imádtak, a Renfán csillaga volt a jelképük. Sosem látjuk Dávid csillagát a Bibliában, de viszont látjuk a hamis istenüknek, Renfánnak a csillagát, és tudjuk ma, hogy nem szolgálják az igaz Istent, mert a Biblia azt mondja, senkiben sincs meg az atya, aki tagadja a fiút. Aki vallást tesz a fiúról, abban az atya is megvan. Ha a zsidók nem hisznek a fiúban, akkor a Biblia azt mondja, hogy ők nem hisznek az atyában. Tehát kiben hisznek? Valaki másban, egy hamis istenben. Ezért nem hisznek ugyanabban az Istenben, mint mi. Sokszor hallottam már ezt, hogy ők hisznek az atyában, csak éppen nem veszik tudomásukra Jézust. De a Biblia azt tanítja, hogy lehetetlen hinni az atyának, ha nem ismerik el Jézust.
Ha visszamész a kőműves testvériséghez, a szabad kőművességhez, az ő nagy jelképük a G. Ha jól megnézed, a szögmérő egy csillagot képez, egy stilizált Dávid csillagot. Sőt, a Dávid csillag megtalálható rengeteg szabad kőműves templomon. Hogy miért van ez? Azért, mert a szabadkőművesség valójában a judaizmus és a kabala tanulmányozásáról szól.
A Jewish Tribune újság 1927. október 28-án állította, a szabadkőművesség a judaizmuson alapszik. Kihagyva a judaizmus tanítását a szabadkőműves rituálékból, és mi marad?
Albert Pike azt írja a Morals and Dogma című könyvében, hogy a kabala az igazi alapeszme. A kabala nélkül nem lenne meg a 33 rituáléja a szabad kőműves páholynak. De az Isten, akit ők imádnak, a nagy építész, az Molok, a csillagisten. Mondhatja nekem bárki, hogy a zsidók nem kerültek súlyos átok alá, mégpedig maga Jézus által. A tények ugyanis magukért beszélnek. A János 8.37 érdekes, mert Jézus ezt mondta. Tudom, hogy Ábrahám magva vagytok. Tehát elismerte azt a tényt, hogy a fizikai leszármazottaik Ábrahámnak. Azt mondta, hogy tudom, hogy Ábrahám magva vagytok, de meg akartok engem ölni, mert az én beszédemnek nincs helye nálatok. Én azt beszélem, amit az én atyámnál láttam, ti is azt cselekszitek azért, amit a ti atyátoknál láttatok. Felelének és mondának neki. A mi atyánk Ábrahám, mondanékik Jézus. Ha Ábrahám gyermekei volnátok, az Ábrahám dolgait cselekednétek. Tehát érdekes, mert a 37. versben elismeri, hogy Ábrahám magvai, ugye a fizikai leszármazottai Ábrahámnak, ám a 39. versben megkérdőjelezi, mondván, ha Ábrahám gyermekei volnátok, az Ábrahám dolgait cselekednétek. És voltaképpen azt mondja, hogy nem vagytok Ábrahám gyermekei, mert, mint ahogy beszéltük, később a fejezetben azt mondja, ti az ördög atyától vagytok. Tehát érdekes, hogy maga Jézus mondta, hogy lehetsz fizikailag Ábrahám leszármazottja, de mégsem vagy Ábrahám magva, és nem tekint Ábrahám gyermekének.
Van egy másik rész a János evangéliumában. János 8. fejezet, 44-es vers, ahol azt mondja, hogy a zsidók az ördög fiai. Ezt prédikálta.
Maga Jézus tanította. Ti az ördög atyától valók vagytok, és a ti atyátok kívánságait akarjátok teljesíteni. Az emberölő volt kezdettől fogva, és nem állott meg az igazságban, mert nincsen ő benne igazság. Mikor hazugságot szól, a sajátjából szól, mert hazug, és a hazugság atya. Vagyis az Úr Jézus Krisztus szerintük az atyuktól, az ördögtől valók. Tehát Jézus is azt gondolta, hogy ők nem Ábrahámot követték, ők nem Mózest követték, ők nem a profétákat követték, ők nem Istent követték. Azt mondta, hogy az atyukat, az ördögöt követték. Tudja, a Jelenések könyve 2. és 3. fejezetében érdekes versek vannak, melyekben azokról van szó, akik azt mondják, hogy ők zsidók, és nem azok, hanem a sátán zsinagógája.
Nem nehéz kitalálni, hogy ki a sátán zsinagógája, mivel csak egy vallás van a világon, amely használ zsinagógát. Judaizmus. Nem nehéz rájönni, hogy kik, amikor a Biblia elmondja nekünk, hogy azt mondják, hogy zsidók, de nem azok. Nem mindenki mondja magáról, hogy zsidó vagyok. Akik gyakorolják a judaizmust, azok mennek és mondják, hogy zsidók. Hát, Pastor Anderson, ők azt mondják, hogy zsidók, de ők tényleg azok. Nem, mert a Róma 2.28 azt írja, mert nem az a zsidó, aki külsőképpen az, sem nem az a körülmetélés, ami testen külsőképpen van, hanem az a zsidó, aki belsőképpen az, és a szívnek lélekben nem betű szerint való körülmetélkedése az igazi körülmetélkedés, amelynek dicsérete nem emberektől, hanem Istentől van. A Biblia azt írja, mert mi vagyunk a körülmetélkedés, akik lélekben szolgálunk az Istennek, és a Krisztus Jézusban dicsekszünk, és nem a testben bizakodunk. Tehát Isten szemében ők nem zsidók, hanem a sátán zsinagógája. A Biblia azt írja a Jelenések könyve 3.9-ben, íme én adok a sátán zsinagógájából, azok közül, akik zsidóknak mondják magukat, és nem azok, hanem hazudnak, íme azt művelem, hogy eljöjjenek és leboruljanak a te lábaid előtt, és megtudják, hogy én szerettelek téged. Isten miért akarná, hogy a sátán zsinagógája tudja, hogy Isten szerette a gyülekezetet Filadelfiában? Azért, mert a zsidók azt gondolják, hogy Isten egyedül őket szereti. Nem hiszik, hogy Isten szereti a görögöket Filadelfiában, és ezt mondta Isten. Azt művelem, hogy a sátán zsinagógája tudja, hogy én titeket szerettelek. Isten szereti a világ gyermekeit. Piros vagy sárga, fekete vagy fehér, becses az ő szemében. Az 1 János 2.22-ben ki a hazug, ha nem az, aki tagadja, hogy a Jézus a Krisztus. Ez Antikrisztus, aki tagadja az atyát és a fiút. Ahhoz, hogy valaki azt higgye, hogy Jézus nem a Krisztus, hinnie kell, hogy van egy Krisztus, és hogy az nem Jézus.
A János 4-ből tudhatjuk, hogy a messiás szó Krisztust jelent. Az asszony a kútnál azt mondta, tudom, hogy messiás ő, aki Krisztusnak mondatik. Ebből tudjuk, hogy a Krisztus szó definíciója messiás. Tehát az 1 János 2.22-ben, amikor azt mondja, ki a hazug, ha nem az, aki tagadja, hogy a Jézus a Krisztus, itt azt mondja igazából, ki a hazug, ha nem az, aki tagadja, hogy a Jézus a messiás. Melyik embercsoport hiszi, hogy van egy messiás, de nem hiszi, hogy Jézus volt az a messiás? Hát a zsidók.
Igazából a zsidó hit Jézusban nyilvánvalóan nem gondolja, hogy ő a messiás, de ön azt gondolja, hogy csak egy másik a hamis messiások hosszú sorából? Igen, hogyha az állítás meg volt téve, hogy ő a messiás, akkor egy hamis messiás volt. Jézus sohasem mondta, hogy én vagyok a megváltó. A zsidó embereket érdekelte volna a messiás. És ők várnak messiásra, akarnak messiást. Tehát, hogyha meg lett volna bármi igazi jellemzője a messiásnak, érdekelte volna őket. De volt neki 12 tanítványa, az nem sok, végül is az egész zsidó népről beszélünk az összes írástudóval együtt. Ők nem voltak megnyerve fölötte, ők nem hittek benne. Egyáltalán nem, a keresztények találták fel a bukott messiás ötletét. Attól, mert elbukott, még mindig a messiás. Mi ezt elutasítjuk. Ha elbuksz, akkor nem vagy a messiás. Ők még mindig figyelik a messiás eljövetelét, és mi tudjuk, hogy az a másik messiás, ami jön, az az antikrisztus. Hogy néz ki a zsidó messiás? Egy nagyon nagy hatalmú király, aki békét és jó akaratot hoz a föld színén. Muszáj létrehozni a békét. Világbékét? Világbékét. Amikor az igazi messiás eljön annyira drámai módon, hogy nem lehet visszautasítani, akkor mindenki elfogadja, hogy ő az igazi messiás. Világszerte? Világszerte, még a nem zsidók is, mert mindenki a messiásra vár. Tehát amikor a messiás eljön, ön azt mondja, hogy az egész világ hinni fog benne? Igen, az egész világ, mert a célja az lesz, hogy hozza az egész világot egy igazi felvilágosultságra. Minden nemzet áramlani fog Jeruzsálem felé, hogy tanuljanak tőle. Ez kezdeményezni fog egy világbéke időszakot. A messiás egy szörnyű karizmatikus alak lesz, nagy tudással és kommunikációs ügyességgel. És ő egy nagy harcos lesz. Ő a zsidók nagy védője lesz, és legyőzi az összes ellenségeiket egy állandó fajta módon. Ha megfigyeled a zsidók messiásának leírását, ők egy tökéletes képet festenek az Antikrisztus bibliai leírásáról. Elfoglalja az egész világot. Háború által fog békét hozni. A világ összes vallása benne fog hinni, világbékét fog hozni, összeegyesít mindannyiunkat.
Rengeteg keresztény van, akik szegények, nem tudják, mit csinálnak. Egy profícia konferencián voltam Floridában, és odajött hozzám egy hölgy, és a Dávid csillagot viselte. És megkérdeztem tőle, hogy miért hordja azt, és azt mondta, annyira fontos kimutatni, hogy támogatjuk Izraelt. Megkérdeztem tőle, ön hogyan támogatja Izraelt? Erre azt válaszolta, hogy minden hónapban pénzt adok a Templomhegy Alapítványnak. Ez egy zsidó szervezet. Na és mondtam neki, hogy de hát nem tudja, hogy a 2 Tesszalonika 2-ben az áll, hogy az Antikrisztus be fog ülni abba a templomba, és Istennek fogja mondani magát minden más Isten felett állónak? Erre azt mondta, hogy hát akkor azt hiszem bibliai proféciát segítek beteljesedni. Mondtam neki, hogy így igaz, elősegíti az Antikrisztus eljövetelét. De hát ki akarná ezt tenni?
Mikor jön egy ember és kivívja Izrael háborúit, legyőzi az ellenségeit és megépíti a templomot, béke a földön. A vezető, aki tette, mindnyájan leborulunk a király előtt. Értik, hogy mondom? Bárki legyen az. Tehát a te meglátásod erről, te mondod, hogy a második eljövetel. Rendben, mi szerintünk az első. Nézzék, a zsidók készek elfogadni az Antikrisztust, mint messiást. Míg a keresztények úgy vannak tanítva, hogy az utolsó időkben a zsidók hinni fognak Jézus Krisztusban. Hát kevesebb keres zseninél, hogy kifürkészük, mit csinál itt az ördög. Amikor a zsidók elfogadják az Antikrisztust, mint messiást, akkor a hitehagyott keresztények azt fogják mondani, nézzétek, ez Jézus Krisztus második eljövetele. Nézzétek, a zsidók hisznek benne. Mi az ördög célja az Antikrisztussal? Hogy meggyőzze az embereket, hogy a második eljövetele Jézus Krisztusnak. És mint bármely más hamis tanítás, ez is egy szövegkörnyezetből teljesen kiragadott igerészen alapszik. A Róma 11 végét teljesen kiveszik annak szövegkörnyezetéből, az egész Róma 11 elejét teljesen figyelmen kívül hagyják, és rögtön a végére ugranak egyből a 26-os versre. És így az egész Izrael megtartatik. És mondani fogják, látod, az utolsó időkben mindenki Izraelben megtér. Elfelejtik, hogy a Biblia éppen most beszélt a Róma 9-ben, hogy mindnyájan nem izraeliták, akik Izraeltől valók. A fizikai leszármazottak nem az igazi Izrael. Azt mondta, mert nem az a zsidó, aki külsőképpen az, hanem az a zsidó, aki belsőképpen az. Azok, akik hisznek Jézus Krisztusban, az igazi Izrael. Hogyan választhatnál egy embert, aki nem tért meg, és mond, ők Izrael, amikor a Biblia azt mondja, hogy egész Izrael megtartatik? Ez azt mondja, hogy aki nem tért meg, nem Izrael. Ez az Antikrisztus, nem Jézus Krisztus, aki egyesíteni fogja a zsidókkal, a hitehagyott keresztényeket az összes többi vallással a világon. Ahhoz, hogy a zsidó antikrisztus egyesítse az összes vallást a világon, az ördögnek muszáj rávennie a kereszténység nagyját, hogy nézzék a zsidókat hívőtársaiknak, annak ellenére, hogy mennyire visszautasítják és káromolják Jézus Krisztust. TV evangélisták, mint például John Hagee, figyelmen kívül hagyják a tiszta tanítását az új szövetségnek, és alkalmazzák az ígéreteket Ábrahámnak az 1 Mózes 12:1-3-ban a mai napi Krisztus elutasító Izraelnek. Bárki, aki egy biblikus nézetet tart, hogy a zsidók többé nem Isten kiválasztott népe, azt a média megbélyegzi, mint antiszemitát.
Israel's fight is our fight. We are one. We are united. We will not be discouraged. We will not be defeated. We will not be intimidated. We will not sit down. We will not be silent. We are the worst nightmare of the anti-Semites of the world. The victory is going to be ours.
Hogyha nincsenek Izraellel és a zsidókkal, akkor én sem vagyok önökkel. Köszönöm, és Isten áldja. Izrael népe mellett áll. Megkérem önöket, hogy csatlakozzanak hozzám, és minden keresztényhez, és minden zsidóhoz, és minden szabadság szerető amerikaihoz, hogy követeljük, hogy ez az elnök és a kongresszus tegyen meg mindent, ami szükséges, hogy kiírtsuk a gonoszságát az iszlám államnak és a radikális iszlámnak a világ színéről.
Megáldom azokat, akik téged áldanak, és megátkozom azt, aki téged átkoz.
Jobb, ha nem vagy Izrael ellensége.
Megáldatik benned a föld összes nemzetsége.
Igen, amen.
Vele vagy ellene, nem lehetsz mindkettő. A személy, a gyülekezet, a nemzet, aki megáldja a zsidó államot és a zsidó embereket, azt Isten megáldja mérhetetlenül. Izraelt megáldani nem csak azt jelenti, hogy hát megáldalak, velük kell állni a szükség órájában. Persze a Biblia azt írja a 2 János 9-11-ig, hogy aki félrelép és nem marad meg a Krisztus tudománya mellett, annak egynek sincs Istene. Aki megmarad a Krisztus tudománya mellett, mind az Atya, mind a Fiú az övé. Ha valaki elmegy hozzátok és nem ezt a tudományt viszi, ne fogadjátok be azt házatokba, és azt ne köszöntsétek. Mert aki köszönti azt, részes annak gonosz cselekedeteiben. És mit teszel, amikor köszöntesz valakit, ahogy a Biblia leírja? Megáldod őket. Tehát a mai evangélikus kereszténység szerint muszáj megáldjuk Izraelt, ha akarjuk Isten áldását magunkon. Míg a 2 Jánosban az áll, hogyha megáldjuk azokat, akik visszautasítják az Isten fiát, részesek vagyunk annak gonosz cselekedeteiben.
Az evangéliumiak természetesen egy komoly részét képezik az amerikai kereszténységnek. A déli baptisták, a pünkösdisták, az Isten gyülekezete, ezek nagyon buzgó felekezetek, és ezek mindig is nagyon Izrael pártiak és cionista pártiak voltak. Sokan közülük igazából be is csukták a zsidók előtt az ajtót a megtérésre, mondván, ó, nektek nem kell Jézus, ti zsidók vagytok.
A Houston Chronicle labban John Hagee azt mondta, nem próbálom megtéríteni a zsidó embereket a keresztény hitre. Nincs semmi az Izrael tisztelet estén, ami ezt teszi. Sőt, a zsidókat megtéríteni próbálni időpazarlás. A zsidó ember, akinek gyökere van a judaizmusban, nem fog áttérni a kereszténységre. Mindenki más, aki buddhista, ha bahály, hinnie kell Jézusban. De nem a zsidók. A zsidóknak már eleve van egy szövetségük Istennel, ami sosem volt felcserélve a kereszténységgel. És valójában ez a leginkább antiszemita kijelentés, amit valaha is mondhatna. Ne evangelizáld a zsidókat. Ez a zsidókat fogja küldeni a pokolra. A Biblia azt írja, aki hisz a fiúban, örök élete van, aki pedig nem hisz a fiúnak, nem lát életet, hanem az Isten haragja marad rajta. Míg John Hagee azt tanítja, hogy a zsidók már is mehetnek, és nem kell evangélizálni a zsidókat. Hát John Hagee téved. A Biblia azt mondja, hogy muszáj evangélizálnunk az elveszetteket, és hogy tegyetek tanítványokká minden népeket. Az előbb említettem C.I. Scofieldről, hogy elvált és újraházasodott. Nem érdekes, hogy John Hagee is ugyanaz a történet? Elvált a feleségétől, elvett egy más hölgyet, és vezet egy hatalmas pünkösdi gyülekezetet, és hangsúlyozza Izraelt az imádat pontjáig.
Free is free indeed. Give him praise and glory in the house of God.
A 18 000 embertől, aki San Antonióban a gyülekezetéhez tartozik, a 99 millió otthonig, aki mondja, hogy csatlakozik a heti rádió és televízió adásába, John Hagee felépített egy hatalmat. megosztva az evangéliumot Izraelről az evangélikusoknak világszerte, és mint a Q5 vezetője, a hatalma kinyúl a pulpitustól a politikáig. John Hagee egy Istent káromló hamis próféta, aki azt tanítja, hogy Jézus Krisztus nem azért jött a földre, hogy ő legyen a megváltó. Az In Defense of Israel megmozgatja a keresztény teológiát. Bebizonyítja a Szentírásból, hogy a zsidó emberek egészében nem utasították el Jézust, mint a messiást. Bebizonyítja azt is, hogy Jézus nem azért jött a földre, hogy a messiás legyen. Bizonyítékot nyújt, hogy egy kálvári összeesküvés volt Róma, a főpap és Heródes között, hogy kivégezzék Jézust, aki egy felkelő volt, és túl veszélyes ahhoz, hogy éljen. Mivel Jézus nem volt hajlandó szóval, sem tett által messiásnak állítani magát, hogyan hibáztathatnánk a zsidókat, hogy elutasították, ami nem is volt ajánlva? Olvassa el ebben a sokkoló expozéban. In Defense of Israel. John Hagee nem egy független baptista, sem King James Biblia hívő. Szóval sokan, akik nézik ezt a dokumentumfilmet, gondolják, hát ez nem a mi emberünk. Rendben, és mi van Sam Gippel, aki éppen körülbelül 1 éve prédikált egy gyülekezetben, Idaho államban, ahol azt mondta, majdnem idézni is tudnám, tudják, minek nem hívom sosem Jézust? Sosem hívom a messiásnak. Tudják, minek nem hívom Jézust? Sosem hívom a messiásomnak. Tudjátok miért? Gondolod, hát ő a messiás. Ő nem a messiásod. Kivétel, ha zsidó vagy, ő nem a megváltód. Idegen nemzet vagy nem? Rendben. Akkor nekünk sosem volt megváltó ígérve. Bocsánat, de Sam Gipp téved. Lehet, ha népszerű még a független baptisták között is, de ez helytelen. Ha Sam Gipp, vagy Peter Ruckman, vagy bárki legyen. Az Isten szava az Isten szava, és nem fogjuk engedni, ha Scofield, ha John Hagee, vagy a mi kedvenc prédikátorunk, vagy ha a mi kedvenc professzorunk vagy tanítónk, hogy befolyásolja, hogy mit mond az ige. Jézus Krisztus a megváltó. Ő az én megváltóm, ő mindenki megváltója. John Hagee elmondja a Houston Chronicle cikkében, sok keresztény teológus antiszemita, mert azt mondják, hogy a szövetség a zsidókkal elúszott. Hogy a zsidók helyettesítve vannak a kereszténységgel, és hogy Izrael nem érdemli meg az amerikai katonai támogatást. Nem is egyedül a keresztény cionisták szeretik Hagee tanítását, hogy a keresztényeknek muszáj támogatni Izraelt. De még azt is követelik, hogy az amerikai kormány támogassa Izraelt katonailag és pénzügyileg. És mert az evangélikus keresztények nagy részét kiteszik a szavazó népességnek, a politikusok kötelességtudóan tesznek utazásokat Izraelbe, hogy imádkozzanak a zsidó Istenhez a siratófalnál. Rengeteg konzervatív, evangélikus, republikánus szavazó van, akinek érzékeny pontja ez a dolog. És hogyha látják kiállni Ted Cruz-t a Fox News-on, és mondja, hogy 100%-ig Izrael mögött áll, amikor látják ezt megtörténni, sok konzervatív szavazó fogja mondani, hé, ez a Cruz alak jobb, mint gondoltam. Így van, valójában épp most volt a Keresztények Egyesülnek Izraelért esemény, amely egy evangélikus keresztény szervezet, amely nagyon izraelpárti.
Before and after the presidency of Donald Trump, the United States was, and now it is again, on what I would call an intentional trajectory to fulfill what famous Freemason Manly P. Hall described as the secret destiny of America, which includes a future national and global subservience to the God of Freemasonry, a deity that most Americans would not imagine when reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to one nation under God. In fact, the idea by some that the United States was established as a monotheistic Christian nation by those who designed Washington, D.C., and that the God referred to on American currency as a Judeo-Christian one, it's really a puzzling conclusion when reflected against the deistic beliefs of so many of the founding fathers as you can see, perpetually viewed in the so-called supreme architect deism of Freemasons and in the supreme judge of the world and the divine providence notations that are in the Declaration of Independence and other founding documents, as well as the countless pagan icons that actually dominate the symbols, the statues, the buildings, the seals that were carefully drafted under official government auspices, the Great Seal of the United States primary among them, which Manly P. Hall, the famous Freemason, rightly called the signature of that exalted body of Masons who designed America for what he called a peculiar and particular purpose. It all bears rich symbolism, forecasting anything but Christianity. As a matter of fact, when Christians in the 1800s argued that a hypothetical annihilation of the United States would lead to antiquaries of succeeding centuries, and by that they meant historians, concluding that America had been a heathen nation based on the symbolism of the Great Seal, Congress was pushed to create something reflecting the Christian faith of so many of its citizens. U.S. President and Freemason Theodore Roosevelt, he strongly opposed this idea, but other Masons weren't as frustrated with the plan because, given the ambivalence of the term God, and the axiom that, interpreted within the context of the Great Seal's symbolism, this certainly would not infer the biblical Christian God. Therefore, the slogan, "In God We Trust," whoever you believe that God is, was accommodated by Masons and other Illuminatus, who therefore approved as the official U.S. motto the phrase, "In God We Trust." In my book, Zenith 2016, which among other things noted that the year of Donald Trump's presidential election had been foreseen by prophets and sages for thousands of years as the apex date, when governments would begin shifting toward the spirit that is predicted on the Great Seal of the United States, the Antichrist, followed by the actual man of sin's arrival and acceptance on the global stage in the year 2025, which people will discover in the new book Zeitgeist 2025. But this was to illustrate the point in my book Zenith 2016 that one definitely would not determine that the God in America's official motto refers to the Father of Jesus or a biblical Trinity. I wrote in that book, quote, "Imagine yourself as a space traveler who visits Earth in a fictional post-apocalyptic world. Digging through the rubble of the once thriving planet, you come across a copy of a US $1 bill with the two-sided Great Seal of the United States joined in the middle by the phrase, 'In God We Trust.' Upon consideration, you ask yourself, what God did this refer to? And with no preconceptions, you allow the symbolism on the seal to speak for itself, from which you quickly determine that this had been a great culture who worshipped Egyptian and Greek deities, especially a particular solar one whose all-seeing eye glares from atop an unfinished Egyptian pyramid. Upon further investigation into the specific beliefs of the strange group whose members had influenced the Great Seal, you discover from their highest masters, including one illustrious Albert Pike, that the sun god they venerated so highly had been known to them at various times in history by the names Apollo, Osiris, and Nimrod, end quote. Now, I made that argument in Zenith 2016 because, unknown to most Americans, and certainly to the average Christian, the Great Seal's mottos and symbolism relate to both Osiris and Apollo specifically, and yet as one. Osiris is the dominant theme of the Egyptian symbols, his resurrection and return, while the mottos of the seal point directly to Apollo, and the eagle, a pagan emblem of Jupiter, to Apollo's father. For instance, the motto Annuit Coeptus This is from Virgil's Aeneid, in which Ascanius, the son of Aeneas from conquered Troy, prays to Apollo's father, Jupiter or Zeus. Charles Thomson, the designer of the Great Seal's final version, condensed line 625 of Book 9 of Virgil's Aeneid, which reads, Jupiter omnipotus, audacibus annuet coeptus, which means all-powerful Jupiter favors the daring undertaking. He condensed that down to annuet coeptus. He approves our undertaking. While the phrase Novus Ordo Seclorum, a new order of the ages, was adapted in 1782 from inspiration that Thomson found in a prophetic line in Virgil's Eclogue 4, which reads Magnus ab integro seclorum nascitur ordo, from Virgil's Eclogue 4, line 5, the interpretation of the original Latin being, and the majestic roll of circling centuries begins anew. Now that phrase is from the Cumae Sibyl, a pagan prophetess of Apollo, identified in the Bible as a demonic deceiver, and it involves the future birth of a divine son spawned from a new breed of men sent down from heaven when he receives the life of gods and sees heroes with gods commingling. According to this prophecy, this is Apollo, the son of Jupiter, or Zeus, who returns to Earth through mystical life given to him from the gods when the deity Saturn, or Jupiter, returns to reign over the cosmos in a new pagan golden age, what the alignment of Jupiter and Saturn on December 21, 2020 forecast, which many, by the way, including pastors, were erroneously referring to as the Christmas star. According to the Greek texts, the Magi followed an asteroid, not a stationary star alignment, whose trajectory led them to Bethlehem. But it was the closest that these two planets have appeared together in approximately 800 years not long ago, and it did indeed forecast the arrival of a messianic son, the false one, whose spirit will reside in the beast of Revelation 17:8. From the beginning of the prophecy, referenced on the Great Seal of the United States, here's what we read. Now the last age by Cumae Sibyl sung has come and gone, and the majestic roll of circling centuries begins anew. Justice returns old Saturn's reign, with a new breed of men sent down from heaven. Only do thou at the boy's birth, in whom the iron shall cease, the golden race arise. Befriend him, chaste Lucina, 'tis thine own Apollo reigns. He shall receive the life of gods and see heroes with gods commingling, and himself be seen of them, and with his father's worth reign over the world. Assume thy greatness, for the time draws nigh, dear child of gods, great progeny of Jove, or Jupiter Zeus. See how it totters the world's orbed might, earth and wide ocean, and the vault profound, all see enraptured of the coming time. End quote. According to Virgil and the Cumae Sibyl, whose prophecy formed the Novus Ordo Seclorum on the Great Seal of the United States, the New World Order begins during a time of chaos, when the earth and the oceans are tottering, a time like today. This is when the Son of Promise will suddenly arrive on earth, Apollo incarnate, a pagan savior, born of a new breed of men sent down from heaven when heroes and gods are blended together. This sounds eerily similar to what the Watchers did during the creation of Genesis 6 giants, doesn't it? And why many believe that Antichrist also represents the return of the Nephilim. But to understand why such a fanciful prophecy about Apollo, son of Jupiter, returning to Earth should be important to you, in ancient literature, Jupiter was the Roman replacement of Yahweh, as the greatest of the gods. He was a counter Yahweh. His son Apollo is a replacement of Jesus, a counter Jesus. And this Apollo comes to rule the final New World Order when justice returns old Saturn's reign. Now this ancient goddess Justice, who returns Saturn's reign, Saturnia Regna, the pagan golden age, was known to the Egyptians as Mat and to the Greeks as Demas, while to the Romans she was Lustitia. Now statues and reliefs of her adorn thousands of government buildings and courts around the world, but especially in Washington, D.C., where she stands as familiar Lady Justice, blindfolded and holding scales and a sword. She represents, according to the prophecy, the enforcement of secular law, and is, according to this Sibyl's conjure, the authority that's going to require global compliance to the zenith of Satan's dominion, concurrent with the coming of Apollo. What's more, the Bible's accuracy concerning this subject is alarming, including the idea that pagan justice will require surrender to a satanic system in a final world order under the rule of Jupiter's son. In the New Testament, the identity of the god Apollo, coded in the Great Seal of the United States as the Masonic Messiah who's going to return to rule the earth, is the same spirit, verified by the same name that will inhabit the political leader of the end times New World Order. For instance, according to key Bible prophecies, the Antichrist will be the progeny or the incarnation of the ancient spirit of Apollo. 2 Thessalonians 2:3 says, "Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition." And this is the Greek word apoleia, Apollo. Revelation 17:8 likewise ties the coming of Antichrist with Apollo, revealing that the beast shall ascend from the bottomless pit and enter into him. It says, "The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition," apoleia, Apollo. "And they that dwell on earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is." End quote. Among other things, this means that the Great Seal of the United States is a prophecy, hidden in plain sight by the Founding Fathers for more than 200 years, foretelling the return of a terrifying demonic god that seizes control of earth in the new order of the ages. This supernatural entity was known and feared in ancient times by different names: Apollo, Osiris, and even farther back as Nimrod, whom Masons consider to be the father of their institution. In the last chapter of the book Zeitgeist 2025, we circle back to that prophecy to expose the most insidious aspect of the scheme that is now counting down to the year 2025. When U.S. Representative Nancy Pelosi on January 4, 2007, assumed her role as Speaker of the House at the opening of the 110th Congress, she followed the pattern that had been set by George W. Bush and his old man, infusing a loaded statement concerning the Founding Fathers, saying they were so confident in the, quote, America that they were advancing, they put on the Great Seal of the United States, Novus Ordo Seclorum, a new order for the centuries, end quote. Pelosi did not go into detail as to why she considered the phrase Novus Ordo Seclorum important dialectic during the momentous changeover of the control of Congress, nor did she add why that expression exists beneath the unfinished pyramid and the all-seeing eye of Horus Osiris Apollo on the Great Seal of the United States in the first place. But her allusion to it was not coincidental. I believe it was framed against January 20, 2001, when her dynastic establishment president friend George W. Bush, during his first inaugural address, faced the obelisk known as the Washington Monument, and twice referred to an angel that rides in the whirlwind and directs this storm, end quote. Now, his statement was credited to Virginia statesman John Page, who had written to Thomas Jefferson after the Declaration of Independence was signed, saying, "We know the race is not to the swift nor the battle to the strong. Do you not think that an angel rides in the whirlwind and directs this storm?" End quote. Now, 5 weeks after Bush's inaugural, on Wednesday, February 28, 2001, Congressman Major R. Owens of New York stood before the House of Representatives, and he actually prayed to this angel in the whirlwind. He asked the spiritual force to guide the future and the fate of the United States. 28 weeks later, for a total of 33 weeks from the day of the inaugural, a number invaluable to mysticism and occult fraternities, 19 Islamic terrorists attacked the United States, according to the official story, hijacking 4 commercial airlines and crashing 2 of them into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City. They slammed a 3rd into the Pentagon, and a 4th, which had been directed towards Washington, D.C., crashed near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. But what happened that day resulted in nearly 3,000 immediate deaths, at least 24 missing persons, and the stage being set for changes to the existing world order. Now, when Bush was giving his second inaugural speech 4 years later, he again offered cryptic commentary, saying, quote, "For a half-century, America defended our freedom by standing watch on distant borders. After the shipwreck of communism came years of relative quiet, years of repose, years of sabbatical. And then there came a day of fire." End quote. A few paragraphs following that, Bush added this, "By our efforts, we have lit a fire as well, a fire in the minds of men. It warms those who feel its power. It burns those who fight its progress. And one day, this untamed fire of freedom will reach the darkest corners of our world." End quote. Now, this phrase, "a fire in the minds of men," is from Fyodor Dostoevsky's 19th century book, The Possessed, or The Devils, a novel set in pre-revolutionary Russia, where civil resistance is seen championed by nihilist Sergei Negev, who tries to ignite a revolution of such destructive power that society will be completely destroyed and then rebuilt. The fact that a United States president would quote this phrase in an official speech of record was astonishing to many analysts, given that The Possessed is about violent government crackdown on dissent that sparks civil unrest and revolution marked by public violence, something eerily reminiscent of today. Fire in the Minds of Men is also the title that historian James H. Billington chose for his famous book on the history of revolutions, including the origin of occult Freemasonry and its part in the American Revolution. In his closing comments, Bush himself tied the inaugural crypticisms to the Masonic involvement in the American Revolution, saying this, quote, "When our founders declared a new order of the ages, they were acting on an ancient hope that is meant to be fulfilled." End quote. The phrase, "a new order of the ages," is of course taken from the Masonically designed Great Seal, the Novus Ordo Seclorum. And Bush further acknowledged that the secret society members were acting on an ancient hope, an ancient scheme that is meant to be fulfilled. Now fast forward to the election of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and the surreal, illicit invocation to dark supernaturalism tied to those governing entities intent on fulfilling, as Bush prophesied, that ancient conspiracy from the Great Seal of the United States has been immediately revived, right on cue. We find Democrat Representative Emanuel Cleaver, for instance, offering the congressional prayer, opening up the 117th Congress in, quote, the name of the monotheistic god Brahma, and God known by many names by many different faiths, end quote. Now, setting aside the numerous incorrect assumptions by Cleaver involving Brahma, the entreaty to such a Hindu god was actually highly appropriate, given that Vice President Kamala Devi Harris, her name also invokes deities from Hindu mythology, from which Brahma is taken, but except in her case, illusionary and destructive ones. From the surprising meaning of Kamala Harris's name at thelist.com, we discover that Kamala is another name of the well-known Hindu goddess who is probably better known as Lakshmi. Devi is a Hindu goddess as well. It's a Sanskrit word that means goddess, but it's also the name of the Hindu mother goddess. Devi is considered to encompass womanhood completely, but she does have a fierce side and is involved not only creating worlds, but destroying them as well. Kamala Harris's sister's middle name matches hers, Maya. Her middle name is Lakshmi. Maya is also a Sanskrit name meaning illusion, and is another name of Durga, a Hindu goddess. Now the list goes on to explain that Kamala's mother, Shamala, chose those names specifically because, quote, a culture that worships goddesses produces strong women, end quote. That's what she told the Los Angeles Times. Perhaps this explains why those strong women and men have taken to the streets of Portland, Oregon over the last 2 years to feed the spirit of chaos beneath the shadow of Portlandia, the second largest copper statue after the Statue of Liberty of a goddess in the United States. At 30 feet 10 inches tall and weighing 6.5 tons, if she was standing up, she would tower at approximately 50 feet high. The Portlandia Repose is located above the entrance of the City of Portland office buildings downtown, and it's implicative, actually, of the goddess of witchcraft, Hecate. Supposedly designed after Lady Commerce on the Portland City Seal, she holds a trident, considered of the utmost importance for sorcery and indispensable to the efficacy of infernal rites. She holds that under a six-pointed star, which is, of course, also an important instrument of dark arts and Hecatean witchcraft. Now, as occultists know, the metal, copper, that Portlandia is crafted from was sacred to ancient goddess worshippers. In early Rome, copper was called cyprium, due to being primarily mined from Cyprus, the birthplace of the goddess Aphrodite. It was also sacred to the sun god of Babylon and similar deities, some of whom required human sacrifice. A plaque beneath Portlandia offers disquieting connections between her influence over that city and the souls of those citizens that she reigns over. Here's what it says, quote, she kneels down, and from the quietness of copper reaches out. We take that stillness into ourselves, and somewhere deep in the earth, our breath or souls become her city. If she could speak, this is what she would say. Follow that breath. Home is the journey we make. This is how the world knows where we are, end quote. So the pattern continues between some of America's recent national leaders whose invitations, unlike Donald Trump's habitual recognition of the Judeo-Christian God of the Bible, have been to dark supernaturalism for ruling over and guiding the souls and destiny of this nation into an occult world order. This now includes the new vice president, who could certainly become the actual president if acting Joe Biden, whom former White House stenographer Mike McCormick, who worked for Biden for 6 years, says has lost at least 50% of his cognitive abilities, becomes incapacitated, or otherwise incapable of fulfilling his 4-year term, who bears the name of Hindu entities connected with illusion and the destruction of worlds. By the way, Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, upon witnessing the first detonation of the nuclear weapon on July 16, 1945, actually quoted the related Bhagavad Gita Hindu text declaring, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds," end quote. Now, Joe Biden's name is likewise intriguing. In fact, a Jewish scholar points out that the Hebraic name for Joe Biden actually translates, alas, judgment, while other experts note that it beckons the arrival of a promised son, a Messiah, such as is reflected on the Great Seal of the United States of America. According to prominent Rabbi R.I. Weingarten, who says Biden's name contains the letters Yud Dalid, this spells out the word Yad, or hand, and he tells us why this is important. There's an article at Israel 365 that explains. Rabbi Weingarten states that the first and last letters of Biden's name spell out the word ben, meaning son, which hints at the process of Messiah, which will come through Messiah ben David, the anointed son of David, and Messiah ben Joseph, the anointed son of Joseph. Now, Rabbi Weingarten adds that the gematria, the Hebrew numerology of Ben, is 52, equaling the name of Elijah, the prophet who is the harbinger of Messiah. Now, here's something else he says. This is not to say that Biden is the Messiah or will announce the Messiah, but this is a reminder that even a path that we would rather not choose, that is, the election of Joe Biden, could be God's method to bring about the final redemption. Now, Rabbi Weingarten then notes the inner letters of the name of Biden, Yud and Dalet, and the gematria of those letters equaling 24. He goes on, quote, "Many times in the Bible, David's name is written with a Yud, bringing the numerical total of his name to 24. Biden's last name is coming to remind us that we are on the verge of Elijah's arrival to reestablish the Davidic dynasty," end quote. Now, the problem is, of course, for Christians and Messianic Jews, the Messiah already arrived in the New Testament. His name is Jesus. Therefore, the prophetic suggestion involving Biden's name most likely indicates a role that he could play with the coming of the false Messiah, the Antichrist. Even some Orthodox rabbis seem to agree with that, connecting the election of Biden and Kamala with the return of the days of Noah. Rabbi Joel Schwartz, the head of the Sanhedrin's Noahide court and a highly respected Torah law authority, produced a video in which he commented on the divergent possibilities of the U.S. presidential election. Here's a quote. "The elections were held on the 17th of Cheshvan." He says that, and then he makes us understand what this has to do with Jewish tradition, the 17th of Cheshvan being the start of the rains that caused the flood in the time of Noah. They begin falling on the 17th of Cheshvan. He goes on, quote, "It was also on that day that here in Israel, the first rains of the season fell in earnest. They should have been rains of blessing, but since Biden was elected, these rains became like the rain on the same day in the time of Noah, a harbinger of the coming flood." Rabbi Schwartz adds, quote, "The Democrats are spreading the very same sins that forced Noah into the ark," end quote, while another rabbi similarly notes that in Hebrew, Haris means destruction. With Trump out of the way, at least for the time being, the dark side of the deep state is quickly reviving efforts to refill the swamp and to get America back on track to its secret destiny, summoning those agents of chaos whose ancient scheme will culminate in arrival of the dreaded man of sin. Now, Joe Biden himself pledged allegiance to this new world order in a Wall Street Journal op-ed titled "How I Learned to Love the New World Order," in which he detailed his vision of surrendering American sovereignty to a new global government via the United Nations. He said, quote, "Most Americans, myself included, reject 1930s-style isolationism. They expect to see the strong hand of American leadership in world affairs, and they know that many security threats require global solutions, end quote. Will Biden's vision quickly unfold in the countdown to Zeitgeist 2025? People who are not governed by God will be ruled by tyrants, said William Penn, the founder of the English North American colony, the province of Pennsylvania. And for all those now bidding the return of old Saturn or Jupiter's reign, we would also remind them of the ancient Greek tragedian Sophocles, whose warning was this: those whom Jupiter wishes to destroy, he first deprives of reason or drives mad. But that said, it appears that left-leaning Americans are nevertheless rushing to embrace the newly appointed Zeitgeist gods, and this was actually vividly illustrated on the spring 2021 cover of Jacobin, a leading voice of the American left offering socialist perspectives on politics, economics, and culture, where the apotheosis of Joe Biden, Barack Obama, and Bill Clinton with Hillary Clinton are accompanied by lesser Elohim, Nancy Pelosi, and Chuck Schumer, portrayed as angels. Biden's larger-than-life bare-chested figure is shown surrounded by holy spirits of Twitter and saints. The latter include kneeling Democrat leaders in the U.S. Congress, Dr. Anthony Fauci, fawning journalists and manager-class devotees eagerly consuming the Holy Scripture from what is probably the latest Barack Obama memoir. The former president himself is shown as a six-winged seraphim, bracketed by the likewise angelic Obama, Hillary, and Bill Clinton, with the trio gazing benignly from the heavens. A crowd of mask-wearing suburban laymen on earth celebrate Biden's ascension. As award-winning filmmaker Christian Pinto noted in the preface of my book, Zenith 2016, all serious researchers contend that the controversy over the so-called Washington, D.C. street layout forming a pentagram is not about whether it's truly there. Aerial photos clearly reveal that it is. Even the Masons who deny that they are responsible for it acknowledge its presence, but argue that Rhode Island Avenue does not extend all the way to complete the figure, and as such, the debate is twofold. Number one, was the D.C. pentagram street layout intentional, or simply the coincidence of geometric lines? Number two, why is the pentagram incomplete? Now, the answer to the second part seems to reveal the first. First, the unfinished pentagram is a well-known symbol in Freemasonry. As Manly P. Hall records in his writing, quote, "The pentagram is used extensively in black magic, but when so used, its form always differs in one of three ways. The star may be broken at one point by not permitting the converging lines to touch. When used in black magic, the pentagram is called the sign of the cloven hoof, or the footprint of the devil," end quote. Now, of course, Hall was writing in the 20th century, but was that symbolism known by Masons during the founding era? The answer is yes. In fact, one of the most famous master masons of all time was Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, who made use of such a pentagram in the play Faust, in which the character of Faust summons Mephistopheles, the devil, to make a pact with him. As the devil tries to leave, he's hindered. As a result, he and Faust have the following exchange. Quote, "Mephistopheles, let me go up. I cannot go away. A little hindrance bids me stay. The witch's foot upon your sill I see." Faust answers, "The pentagram, that's in your way. You son of hell, explain to me. If that stays you, how came you in today? And how was such a spirit so betrayed?" Mephistopheles answers, "Observe it closely. It is not well made. One angle on the outer side of it is just a little open, as you see." The open or broken pentagram was used by Faust to summon the devil in a black magic ceremony. The famous author of the play, Goethe, was not only a Mason, but also a well-known member of the Bavarian Illuminati. And to this day, Freemasons proudly acknowledge that his writings are filled with Masonic symbolism, while books have been written about his Illuminist involvement. Now, Goethe published his first edition of Faust in 1790, and it was in the next 2 years that Pierre Elephant, with the possible help of Thomas Jefferson, came up with the street design for Washington, D.C. It's therefore provable that members of these secret orders were familiar with the idea of an unfinished pentagram before the street layout was complete. Now, admittedly, that does not of itself prove that the pentagram was intentional. But it is interesting that Goethe's play and the DC design were done during the same period. Because of the close interaction between the Freemasonry of America and that of Europe, it's entirely possible, I would say likely, that Elephant and Jefferson were familiar with the symbol and placed it intentionally in the DC pentagram street layout. Occultists around the world understand the power of these symbols and rituals, and they realize they're not only for conveying psychological concepts, but actually for coercing the mysterious and potent supernaturalism invited to take residence there. That belief is deeply preserved in all of the Babylonian, Egyptian, Greek, Roman, Kabbalistic symbolism that is part of Masonic history. And according to famous Freemason Foster Bailey, these symbols intentionally hide, quote, a secret, which veils mysterious forces. These energies, when released, can have a potent effect, end quote. Scottish philosopher Thomas Carlyle once famously added, quote, by symbols accordingly is man guided and commanded, made happy, made wretched, end quote. As previously pointed out, Masons are, as a result, under oath, never to reveal the true meaning of their symbols, and when somehow they are compelled to offer explanation, they falsify the statement, even to lower degree Masons. Now, substantial reasons exist for why the designers of Washington's government center would have wanted to obscure the meaning behind the occultic layout of America's capital. If the public in general had been prematurely convinced of the end game prophesied in the DC symbolism, it would have been beyond the acceptance of prior generations who likely would have demanded change in leaders and facilities. But as time has moved forward, and increasingly it has become necessary for public understanding of America's heritage and intended purpose, little by little, either by providence, promotion, or even resistance, a clearer picture has emerged of what Manly P. Hall called the secret destiny of America. David Oveson, who became a Mason after writing The Secret Architecture of Our Nation's Capital, The Masons and the Building of Washington, D.C., whose works have been widely endorsed by Freemasons as well as Robert Hieronymus, who's considered to be one of the world's foremost authorities on the Great Seal. And of course, David Oveson's work earned praise from Fred Klangneck, the Sovereign Grand Commander of the 33rd Degree Supreme Council of Freemasons in Washington, D.C. And it confirms how such obfuscation was deployed on the Great Seal, down to the smallest detail, including how a letter was even cut from the Latin word seclorum, which is the usual spelling, S-A-E-C-L-O-R-U-M, in order to create the word seclorum as it appears, to contribute to 3 sets of 13 on the reverse side of the Great Seal. Now, after acknowledging that the top motto, Enoet Coeptus, had the obligatory 13 letters, Oveson points out how seclorum was letter cut to join the bottom motto, Novus Ordo Seclorum, so that the phrase would end up being 17 letters, which, when added to the 9 numerals in the Roman date, would equal a total of 26, or 2 sets of the number 13. Combined with the top motto, these 3 sets of 13 were very important to establish, Oveson says, in order to reflect the Trinity represented in the Great Seal's Eye of Providence, and in the nominal triangle, he says, from which the pyramid is constructed, end quote. Based purely on the Great Seal's symbolism, the Trinity these three sets of the number 13 denote is authoritatively identified as Osiris, Horus, and Isis, the pagan versions of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, respectively. The use of the number 13 in this way also connects the Great Seal to the mythological and astrological significance of the legend of Osiris as the dying and rising god. It was evidently so important to maintain this talisman-like value, 13, that other phrases of the design and layout of Washington, D.C., were coordinated accordingly, says Oveson. This includes the laying of the White House cornerstone on October 13, 1792 by Masons, and the 4th of July signing of the Declaration of Independence 13 days after summer solstice, so that the sun would be on Sirius. In Egyptian mythology, the sun represented Osiris, while the star Sirius symbolized Isis, and 13 was the number of pieces of Osiris that Isis was able to find after Set, his evil brother, murdered and threw 14 pieces of him into the Nile. Isis searched the riverbanks until she recovered every piece except for his genitals, which had been swallowed by a fish. Isis replaced the missing organ with an obelisk and magically impregnated herself with Horus. Therefore, in Masonic, as well as in ancient Egyptian mythology, the number 13, used a total of 13 times on the Great Seal, counting front and back, is the number that represents the return or resurrection of Osiris. This mythology was so meaningful to the founding of the United States and the construction of its capital, including having the missing Osiris genitalia represented by the 6,666 inches high Egyptian obelisk known as the Washington Monument, that nearly all of David Oveson's 500-plus page Secret Architect of Our Nation's Capital is dedicated to establishing the singular correlation between Washington, D.C. and Virgo, the constellation of Isis, or what Oveson calls, quote, Isis, who was the chief of the feminine mystery deities and the prototype of the stellar Virgo, end quote. This affiliation existed from the very day that Freemasons gathered on April 15, 1791, beginning appropriately at 3:30 p.m., reflecting the mystical value of 33, because of the astrological position of Jupiter in Virgo, and what this would mean for the secret destiny of America. At exactly 3:30 p.m., Jupiter, it was written, began to rise over the horizon. It was in 23 degrees of Virgo. By this means, the zodiacal power of Virgo, which was called in later Masonic circles the Beautiful Virgin, was able to stamp her benign influence on the building of the federal city. A few of the many Freemasons present at that ceremony would have been only too well aware of the profound implications of what they were doing. It is quite clear, it was written, that the ceremonial placing of the stone related to more than merely the founding of the federal district. It was somehow linked to the future destiny of America itself. By dedicating the United States through its astrological alignment to the Virgin constellation of Isis, the founders had dedicated the destiny of America to fulfilling the secret doctrine of Freemasonry, as also reflected in the Osiris-Apollo symbolism of the Great Seal concerning subservience, now and upon his return as Antichrist, to Osiris, Apollo, Nimrod. Interestingly, the same dedication to Osiris, Isis, Apollo exists in New York, where the events of September 11, 2001 initiated the push toward the Novus Ordo Seclorum. The Statue of Liberty in New York's harbor, which holds the Masonic torch of enlightenment, was presented in 1884 as a gift to American Masons by the French Grand Orient Temple Masons. Designed by French Freemason and sculptor Frederic Auguste Bartholdi, and built by another French Freemason, Gustave Eiffel. The statue was originally identified as the goddess Isis, with the statue's head formed to represent the Greek sun god Apollo, as preserved on an ancient marble tablet, today in the Archaeological Museum of Corinth, Greece. Apollo was represented as a solar deity, dressed in a similar robe and having on its head a radiant crown with the 7 spiked rays of the Helios, Apollo's sun rays, it says. The legend of Osiris and Isis, the connection with Apollo, the magical number 13, and the history surrounding their mythos is often openly discussed in Masonic and Brotherhood-friendly literature. For instance, in Morals and Dogma, Albert Pike enumerated the esoteric significance of the Osiris epic at length, adding that lower-level Masons, what sometimes is called blue masonry, are ignorant of its true meaning, which is only known to those who are initiated into the mysteries, Pike said. He also spoke of the star Sirius, connected to Isis and it linked to Lucifer, Satan, as still glittering in the Masonic lodges as the blazing star. Elsewhere in Morals and Dogma, Pike reiterated that, quote, the all-seeing eye was the symbol of Osiris, and that the sun was termed by the Greeks the eye of Jupiter and the eye of the world, and his is the all-seeing eye in our lodges, end quote. So once people understand this illuminated Masonic connection to the Trinity on America's Great Seal, and what the prophetic symbolism, mottos, and numerology imply, it becomes apparent why so much effort was put forward for so long by those who felt it was necessary to hide this extraordinary destiny. Oveson also acknowledges that conspiracy of silence as well, writing, quote, the motto at the top of the seal, Annuit Coeptus, is from Virgil, from the Aeneid. This is a prayer to the god Jupiter. We should observe that while the subject matter of the reverse of the seal is undoubtedly pagan, if symbolic of Hermetic Egypt, the superior motto is itself a prayer to a pagan god. Could this be the reason why there has been so much reluctance to bring the reverse of the seal into the light of day? Whatever the nature of the god, the prayer directed in this way is a petition that the daring undertaking, the secret destiny of America as symbolized in finishing the pyramid, may be completed and that the new age will find fulfillment, end quote. The information that I just shared with you is only the tip of the iceberg of what I reveal in my new book, Zeitgeist 2025. In fact, much of what I uncover in this book is too hot for mainstream platforms like YouTube and Facebook and would immediately be censored. But now, for the first time ever, you are going to discover hidden secrets and forgotten prophecies surrounding the year 2025, how the current U.S. government is tied to America's occult destiny, lost prophecies from Qumran forecasting 2025 as the final age of man, why historians and intelligence agencies foresee a totalitarian world government by 2025, how America's capital city is laid out to actuate the arrival of the Antichrist, about the malevolent Orwellian Trinity currently converging, the means by which the population's thinking and speaking are being homogenized to create a nation of assimilated devotees who are going to embrace the Antichrist, the deep esoteric meanings that names and titles held in ancient societies, the impact they had upon destiny, and what that precedent could mean now for America's near future. Who the mysterious character Melchizedek of Genesis 14 truly was, what the people of the name covenant is, and much more. So go to sidroth.org/horn or click the link below to get your digital copy of my revelatory new book, Zeitgeist 2025, so you can count yourself among the ones prepared for what is coming next.